How is it going everyone, Clutch Chaos here and welcome to a brand new video. Today I will be reacting to the new ESPN's top 74 players of all time list. So it starts with saying, ESPN's NBA expert panel voted on thousands of head-to-head matchups, taking into consideration both total career value and peak performance. It is always nice to be nominated, but there can be only a select few who make the cut. Our list begins with numbers 74 through 41. So starting with number 74 is Arthur Gilmore. Pretty solid player, averaged 18.8 points per game, 12 rebounds, 2.3 assists and 2.4 blocks per game. Many players could have made the 74th spot, but they went with Arthur Gilmore. I'm not gonna argue with that. He was a pretty solid player throughout his whole career. He led the league for straight seasons in field goal percentage, which is pretty big. So at 74 is Arthur Gilmore. 73 is Dikembe Mutombo. He was a monster defensively, probably one of the best defending centers in league history. He averaged 2.8 blocks per game. His offensive game really wasn't there. He averaged only 10 points per game throughout his career, which explains why he's at 73. I'm also not going to argue with this pick. I think it's pretty deserving for Dikembe Mutombo to be at 73. Number 72 is Damian Lillard. I think this is pretty low for Dame. For one reason, he's been very consistent throughout his whole career. He averaged more than 20 points per game every season except his rookie season where he averaged 19, which is still pretty good for a rookie. His career averages are 24 points per game, 4.2 rebounds, 6.5 assists per game. I think it's pretty low for Dame. He's a really talented player, but I'm just gonna go with it and see who they have above him. Number 71 is Bob Lanier, another really solid player that played with the Pistons and the Bucks. His career averages are 20 points per game and 10 rebounds per game. I don't think he should be higher than Damian Lillard, but I'm just gonna let it slide this time because we just started this list. Number 70 is Tony Parker. I think 70 is a really good spot for him on this list. He was a really good point guard throughout his whole career. He averaged 15.5 points per game, 5.6 assists. He was part of the Spurs dynasty. Pretty good spot. Is he better than Damian Lillard all time? I don't think so, but maybe the championship and the finals MVP makes him above him. Number 69 is Bernard King, another deserving spot. He averaged 22.5 points per game, almost 6 rebounds per game throughout his whole career, and I think that's a very good spot for him. Pistol P at 68, I think that's pretty low. He was a Stephen Curry before Curry even existed. He averaged 24 points per game, 4.2 rebounds, and 5.4 assists per game throughout his whole career. I think he is one of the most underrated players in league history, and I think it's pretty low for him to be at 68. Another underrated player is at 67. Alex English was an amazing scorer. He had the highest points in the 1980s as part of the Nuggets. And scoring was a thing. He was a really great scorer. I think it's also pretty low for him at 67. Number 66 is Dave Cowens. He won 2 championships with the Boston Celtics. A great center. I think it's a pretty good spot for him. Number 65 is Pau Gasol. I think that's low for him. He's really talented, one of the most talented centers we've ever seen. He won many championships with the Lakers and Kobe, so I think that's low for him. Number 64 is El Monroe. I don't know much about him. I just know that he was part of the New York Knicks for almost 10 years. Pretty solid player. I'm not sure if he should be over Pistol P and Alex English, but they just have him at 64. Number 63 is Alonzo Mourning. He was a really great center, also a very good defender. He was also a good scorer. Pretty good spot for him. Number 62 is Dennis Rodman. I think that's pretty high for Dennis Rodman for one reason. He was a great role player, not a great star in the league. If you want to build a championship team, you'll definitely love to have him on your team. But if you want him to lead your team to wins, I'm not sure if he's going to be that one player that could lead your team. Anyway, he was a really smart player. He was a great defender, probably the best rebounder we've ever seen. 61 is Robert Parrish. Pretty solid player. I'm not sure if he also should be above Alex English, Pistol P, Dame, or even Alonzo Mourning, but we'll just let it slide. Number 60 is Willis Reed. He was a great player with the New York Knicks. He won the Knicks, I think, their first championship, and in that season he also won MVP, so I think it's a really good spot for him. Number 59 is Bob McAdoo. I think he should have been a bit higher, one of the most underrated players in league history. He was a great scorer, a really dominant player, and he also won an MVP in 1974-1975. Number 58 is Manu Ginobili. Now don't get me wrong, I love Manu Ginobili. I think he's a really great player, but I don't think he should have been higher than the players that were put below him, like Damian Lillard or Alex English or Pistol P. Number 57 is Clyde Drexler. I think that's low for Clyde. He was one of the best players in the 80s and 90s. He won a championship, although he didn't win for the Blazers, but he's arguably the best player in Blazers history. Maybe Dame will take the spot soon, But yeah, crowd locks are pretty low for him. 56 is Ray Allen. I think that's a pretty great spot for him. He became primarily a 3-point shooter at the end of his career, but he could score from everywhere before. He has the league's record in the most 3-pointers ever made, arguably the second best shooter the league has ever seen. He won a championship with the Celtics and the Miami Heat because, you know, he made the shot that tied the game in Game 6 against the San Antonio Spurs. Number 55 is Vince Carter. I think that's a really good spot for him as well. He was really dominant. We know he's one of the most athletic players I've ever seen. Arguably one of the best players in Toronto Raptors history as well. And nothing to say about him. 54 is Paul Pierce. I think that's pretty low for Paul Pierce because the truth, he was a great player. He was a really good scorer. He was a good defender. He did it all in my opinion. And he also won a championship. I think that's pretty low for him. He should have been a bit higher. Number 53 is Gary Payton. Another player I think he should have been a bit higher. He was the last guard to win Defensive Player of the Year. His name was the Globe for a reason. He was an amazing defender. And he was also a good scorer, so I think that's pretty low for him. Number 52 is T-Mac, Tracy McGrady. I think that's good for him, but I don't think he should have been higher than other guys like Gary Payton and Paul Pierce. When he was in his prime, before his injury, he was leading the league in scoring. That T-Mac was probably like a top 30 player of all time. But if you take his career as an overall, he didn't really play much. He got injured for most of his career, and we got trouble from seeing prime T-Mac win the championship. I'm okay with this spot, but I think that other guy should have been higher than him. 51 is James Worthy. Not much I got to say about him. He was finals MVP with the Lakers, a team that had Magic Johnson on it. He was a great player, and I think that it's a pretty good spot for him. 50 is Wes Unseld. I think that's a bit high for him. He was the last player to win MVP as a rookie. I think the other player was Wilt Chamberlain. I think it's a bit high for him because his rookie season was literally his best season. So I'm not sure if he should have been that high. Number 59 is Reggie Miller. Great player in the 90s, arguably the best player in the Indiana Pacers history. He averaged 18.2 points per game, 3 assists per game. He was a great player and the greatest shooter of his era. Number 48 is Bill Walton. Bill Walton, I think that's a bit too high for him, for the same reason that T-Mac was too high. He was an amazing player when he wasn't injured, but injuries just stayed with him his whole career, and we never got to see him in his prime playing 82 games, which is why I think that it's a bit too high for him. Number 47 is George Gervin. He was a great scorer, one of the best players in the 70s and 80s. I think that's a very good spot for him. Number 46 is Dominique Wilkins. I think that's a good spot for him, maybe a bit higher, but yeah, I think that's a really good spot for him. The Human Highlight film averaged 25 points per game, almost 7 rebounds, 3 assists. He was a really great player and arguably the best player in the Atlanta Hawks history. Number 45 is Anthony Davis. I think that's pretty high for now. He is only 27 years old right now, so maybe a bit lower. He's one of the most talented players in the league right now. As a center or as a power forward, he has really good handles. He's an amazing scorer. He can shoot, he can do everything. He's probably one of the best defenders in the league. I think that's pretty high for him, especially that we didn't see him make it past the first round of the playoffs yet. So maybe if he wins the championship this year, it might be higher for him. Number 44 is Elvin Hayes. I think that's a good spot. Maybe should have been a bit lower because I would have probably taken guys like Dominique Wilkins and Paul Pierce over him. But that's okay, it's a good spot. 43 is Ricky Berry, one of the most hated players at his time, but he was a great scorer, he was a great player, averaged 25 points per game, almost 7 rebounds and 5 assists. He's famous for his underhand free throw. He was a finals MVP, he was a 12-time All-Star, and he had a season when he averaged 36 points per game. 42 is Russell Westbrook. Another player I think is really high. He's an amazing player. He averaged a triple-double for 3 seasons in a row. He was an MVP. He made it to the NBA Finals. But I'm not sure if he should have been that high. Like, I'm still taking Paul Pierce and Pistol Pete, Dominique Wilkins all over Russell Westbrook, to be honest. Even prime Russell Westbrook, because prime Russell Westbrook didn't make it past the first round of the playoffs. And I know that after KD left, the team wasn't as good as before, but he had Paul George, he had Carmelo Anthony, he had Domantas Sabonis, he had Victor Oladipo. I know these guys weren't as good as they are right now, but still, he had some really good supporting cast and he never made it past the first round, so I'm not sure he should have been that high. Amazing stats, very good player, but not a 42nd all-time. Number 41 is Bob Cousy. Really good player. I have nothing against Bob Cousy. I think that's a very good spot for him. At number 40, we have Chris Paul. I think that's a great spot for him. He averaged 18.5 points per game, 4.5 rebounds, 9.5 assists per game, and 2.2 steals. He's been a very good player for so long right now, and unfortunately, he never made it to the NBA Finals. but he's a really good player and one of the best point guards the league has ever seen, so I think that's a perfect spot for him. 39 is Walt Frazier, another guy that has a perfect spot on this list. He was an amazing player on the Knicks and one of the best point guards the league has ever seen, so I think that's a very good spot for him. Number 38 is Bob Pettit. I think that's a bit low for him, should have been a bit higher. His career averages speak up for him. He averaged 26.4 points per game, almost 16 rebounds and 3 assists. He was one of the most dominant players at his time. And he was an MVP twice, so I think he's a bit low. Number 37 is Patrick Ewing, one of the best players in Knicks history. He averaged 21 points per game, 9.8 rebounds, and 2.4 blocks per game. He was a really great player. I think that's a really good spot for him. Number 36 is Kevin McHale. He is one of the most underrated players the league has ever seen. He averaged 18 points per game, 7.3 rebounds in his career, 55 field goal percentage. I think he's one of the best power forwards in league's history. His post game is arguably one of the best the league has ever seen, and he was a stretch forward before stretch forwards even existed. I think that's a very good spot for him. Number 35 is Jason Kidd, another guy that has a perfect spot. His career averaged around the high, especially in points, but he was a really impactful player most of his career, and he's definitely a top 5-6 point guard the league has ever seen. Number 34 is George Mikan. I don't know much about George Mikan. He played a long time ago. I just hear stories about how good he was. I'm not sure if he is a 34th best player of all time, but I'm okay with the selection. Number 33 is John Havlicek, another guy with a great selection. He was a great player, and in the 60s and 70s he was one of the best players in the league, and he was a very important part in the Celtics dynasty that won 11 championships. Great spot for him. 32 is James Harden. I think that's an okay selection at 32. His career averages are 25 points per game. I don't really need to say the rest. He is one of the best scorers in the league right now and probably the best offensive player the league has ever seen. His game gets hated sometimes because of how many times he goes to the free throw line, but he's just a smart player and he knows how to draw fouls. Number 31 is Isaiah Thomas, a top 3-point guard in the league's history. He won 2 championships with the Bad Boy Pistons, a great player. Nothing to say against him. I think that's a good spot. Maybe should have been a bit higher. Number 30 is Steve Nash. Now that's when I think Isaiah Thomas should have been a bit higher than Steve Nash. Steve Nash was an amazing player. He was the 2-time MVP. He was the perfect piece for Mike D'Antoni's 7-second system. So I think he's a really great player. Good spot. Number 29 is Allen Iverson. I think that's a really good spot for him as well. He was one of the best scorers the league has ever seen. He was really undersized at 6 foot, but it didn't matter for him because he had the best handles of all time, hands down. Number 28 is John Stockton. I think that's a low spot for him. He was a great point guard, great defender, great passer. He just did everything. It was sad to not see him and Karl Malone win a championship with the Jazz, but he is a top 2 player of the Utah Jazz history. Number 27 is Giannis. I think that's pretty high for him. He's still pretty young. He's still 25, and even though he was a league MVP last season and he is gonna win it again this season if the season continues, I think that's high for him. He could go on to be a top 10 player of all time, but he is only 25 and it's pretty early to speak of him being at 27. Number 26 is Dwayne Wade. I think that's a bit low for him. Top 3 shooting guard of all time. He won 3 championships with the Heat, one even without LeBron James. Great guard. I think he has the most blocks for a shooting guard in league history. Really great player. Number 25 is Kawhi. Maybe a bit high. I could see him be in the 30s. He won 2 championships. He was a 2-time Finals MVP with 2 different teams. The best defender in the league right now. And he's a great player. Maybe a bit too high, but I'm okay with the selection. Number 24 is David Robinson. Maybe a bit too low. He was a really great center. He averaged 21 points per game, 10.6 rebounds, 1.4 steals, and 3 blocks per game. He was a really dominant player, and he won a championship with the San Antonio Spurs. So I think he should have been a bit higher. Number 23 is Charles Barkley. I think that's a really good spot for him. I would take David Robinson above him, but you could go either way. He averaged 22 points per game, 11.7 rebound. He had a great post game, even though he was an undersized forward. He never won a championship, unfortunately, but he was an MVP. So really great selection. Number 22 is Elgin Baylor. He was one of the greatest scorers the league has ever seen. His career averages are 27.4 points per game and 13.5 rebounds per game. Amazing selection. I think 22 is really good for him. Number 21 is Scottie Pippen. I think that's a bit too high for Scottie. He was a great player. He is a top 3 defender of all time, hands down. But I think that it is too high for him because many of the guys we've seen in the list were the number one option on their teams, but Scottie was never the number one option. I know he played behind MJ, but even though, I don't think he could ever lead a team as the number one option. A bit too high for him. I could see him being in the 30s, but I think 21 is too high for him. Number 20 is Kevin Garnett, a top 5, even probably top 3 power forward of all time. Amazing player, the best player in the Timberwolves history. He averaged 18 points per game, 10 rebounds per game, almost 1 steal and 1 block. He was an MVP, Defensive Player of the Year. He won a championship with the Boston Celtics. I think that's a really great selection. Number 19 is another power forward, which is Dirk Nowitzki. I think 19 is very good for him. We all remember his crazy run with the Dallas Mavericks in 2011 to win them a championship and win Finals MVP. He was also an MVP in his time, and I think that 19 is a very good spot for him. Number 18 is Moses Malone, a really amazing player. He averaged 20 points per game, 12 rebounds per game, 1.3 blocks per game. I think he's a bit high. I could see him in the 20s, but you could never go wrong with Moses Malone. He was a great player. Number 17 is Karl Malone. He was a great power forward, 25 points per game, 10 rebounds per game, 1.4 steals. He never won a championship with the Utah Jazz, but he was a great player. Number 16 is Jerry West, the logo. 27 points per game, 5.8 rebounds, 6.7 assists. Pretty great spot for him. Number 15 is Julius Erving. I think that's a bit too high. Maybe should have been a bit lower, maybe in like 19, 20, but still a really great player. You could never go wrong with Julius Erving. Number 14 is KD. I think KD at 14 is a really great selection. 27 points per game, 7 rebounds, 4.1 assists, and he's not even retired yet. He won 2 championships and 2 finals MVP. Although some people say his championships are questionable because he joined the 73-9 team, but I still think that he deserves them. You know, you play well and you get rewarded with championships. And I can't wait for him to get back on the court because it's been so long since we last saw him play. He is one of my favorite players in the league just because of how great of a scorer he is. He's a really good defender and he is just a really versatile player. Number 13 is Stephen Curry. Now, 13 is a bit too high. And let me tell you why. He was the first ever unanimous MVP. He won 3 championships. But I don't think his game is better than Kevin Durant's game. If you take... I'm not gonna like start with the one-on-one argument. It's just that I think KD has a better impact on a team than Stephen Curry does. Although he's been the best point guard in the league for many years now, I think 13 is a bit too high for him. Maybe 17, 16. But he's a really great player and you can never say anything wrong about him. Number 12 is Hakeem Olajuwon. I think Hakeem's low. He is definitely a top 10 player of all time. He was called the Dream for a reason. He is 1000% the best defender the league has ever seen. He was a great scorer. He won an MVP. He won 2 championships with the Houston Rockets. He was a great player, and I think that he is a top 3 center the league has ever seen. Number 11 is Oscar Robertson. Big O was a great player. He was the first player ever to average a triple-double in a season, and he was just amazing. He won a championship with the Milwaukee Bucks. His career averages are 25.7 points per game, 7.5 rebounds, 9.5 assists. You can never go wrong with Big O. Now, before I get into the top 10, I just want to mention some players that I did not see. Guys like David Thompson, Carmelo Anthony, Dwight Howard, and Klay Thompson. It was really weird not to see them there. Because if you have Ray Allen, you should definitely have Klay. And prime Dwight Howard was the best center in the league. Carmelo Anthony has and will always be a great player. I know he is declining right now, but he's just aging. And David Thompson was a legend. I don't really understand why he's not here on this list. Anyways, number 10 is Shaquille O'Neal. I'm okay with him being at number 10, but I think that other guys like Oscar Robertson and Hakeem Olajuwon should have been a bit higher than him. Hakeem is definitely a better center than Shaq. Shaq is more dominant, but if you want to take the smarter player, it's definitely Hakeem Olajuwon. But it's a really great selection. I mean, Shaq is the top center of all time and a top player, so you could never go wrong with him. 24 points per game, 11 rebounds, and 2.3 blocks. Those are amazing numbers. Number 9 is Kobe Bryant. May you rest in peace, Black Mamba. I think that's a bit low for him. I understand there's a lot of great guys on this list. I think should have been like a 6, a 7, but not a 9. I think 9 is low. His career averages are 25 points per game, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, 1 block, and 1 steal. I think that's a bit low for him. He won many championships. He won many MVPs. I think that's pretty low for him. Number 8 is Tim Duncan. Another guy I think is a bit low. He should be a top 6 guy or top 5 guy of all time. Hands down the best power forward we have ever seen. He was a great defender. He was a great scorer. He did everything. He was an MVP. He was a finals MVP. He won 5 championships with the San Antonio Spurs, so that's why I think he's a bit low. Larry Bird at 7. I think that's a good spot for Larry Bird. I think probably Kobe and Tim Duncan should have been a bit higher. But honestly, with these legends, you could never go wrong. Because it just depends how you evaluate players and what you look at when you make a list. Larry Bird was just ahead of his time. He was a great shooter. He did everything. He was an amazing player. And in the 1980s, he was one of the best players in the league. Number 6 is Will Chamberlain. Hands down the most dominant player the league has ever seen. His career averages are literally 30 points per game, 23 rebounds, and 4.4 assists. He was a great player. He won a couple MVPs, a couple championships. I just would take guys like Kobe, Tim Duncan, and Larry Bird above him just because of the era. We don't really know much about the era Will Chamberlain played in. We know it was the most fast-paced era in the league's history. That's why guys average crazy numbers in these eras. He was an amazing player, but I don't think he should have been 6th overtime over Kobe, Tim Duncan, and Larry Bird. Number 5 is Magic Johnson. I think that's a really great spot for him. He is the best point guard the league has ever seen. His career averages are 19.5 points per game, 7 rebounds, and 11 assists, and almost 2 steals. He was a Finals MVP his rookie season. I think he's the only rookie to win Finals MVP, and he's just a great player. It was so sad that he got a virus at the end of his career and he didn't play more. Number 4 is Bill Russell. Bill Russell is great. He, I think, has the most championships in league's history at 11. But I just think that I would take Kobe, Tim Duncan, and Larry Bird above him. He was an amazing defender, a great rebounder, and a good scorer, but I don't think that... I know that the argument that we use when we say that his era was weak is not a really great argument, but I think that Kobe would have done even better in the 1950s and 1960s, and I think that a versatile player like Tim Duncan would have done even better in the 1960s. That's just my opinion, but he was an amazing player, so you could never say he didn't deserve the spot. Number 3 is Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Great player, the best center the league has ever seen. He has the most points ever scored. His career average at 25 points per game, 11 rebounds, 3.6 assists. He won a championship with the Bucks and with the Lakers. One of the most dominant and great players the league has ever seen. Number 2 is LeBron. We all know that the GOAT conversation is always between Michael Jordan and LeBron James. His career average at 27 points per game, 7.4 rebounds, 7.4 assists, and 1.6 steals per game. He's a great player. He is one of the best athletes the league has ever seen. He was dominant since his rookie season, and that's why he was drafted straight out of high school. He was just an amazing player. And at 35 years old right now, he's still putting up MVP numbers, and he's still impressing everyone with his great performances. He won 3 championships. I know that his record in the finals was 3-6, but this does not take anything away from his great career. He just ran into some really great teams like the Warriors dynasty. And number 1 is obviously going to be the GOAT Michael Jordan. 30 points per game, 6.2 rebounds, 5.3 assists, and 2.3 steals. He was one of the best defenders and one of the best scorers in league's history, and you could never go wrong with Michael Jordan. He's the GOAT. 6 on the finals. He has 5 MVPs. There is nothing else you can say about him. So that's everything for today's video. Thank you so much guys for watching. The list is definitely not perfect. I think that a lot of players were misplaced in this list, but I think it's still an okay list. It was made by ESPN, so it's gonna be always controversial, but I think most players in the top 10 deserve being in the top 10. I would really appreciate if you guys leave a like on this video and subscribe if you like my content. Take care and stay safe. I'll be back very soon. Peace.